She kept his business alive. He threw her a party to celebrate getting rid of her. The banner was red vinyl, stretched across the garage in block letters large enough for the whole neighborhood to read. "Goodbye, freeloader. Don't come back." The grill was smoking, country music was blasting, and every person her father had ever introduced her to was standing in his driveway, laughing like it was the best afternoon of their lives. Olivia was 30 years old, holding her car keys so tightly the metal dug into her palm. She had driven over to collect the last box of her belongings. She had not expected a celebration. Someone on the patio shouted that a 30-year-old woman with no real career should be ashamed of herself. Another voice called out that her poor family had carried her long enough. Then something hit the side of her car, a hot dog, and someone screamed, "There is your last free meal, loser." She did not cry. She did not argue. She walked inside, picked up the box, walked back out, lifted her phone, and took one photograph of that banner, with everyone grinning beneath it. Her father saw her do it and smirked, as if she were finally taking a souvenir from the place that had saved her. 2 weeks later, he was begging her to call him back. To understand what happened next, you need to understand who Olivia actually was, not the version her family performed for neighbors, church cookouts, and Facebook comment sections. The story they told was simple and designed to be believed. She was 30, her engagement had fallen apart before it became a marriage, she worked from a laptop, and she was living in her father's house while the rest of the world moved forward without her. That story played beautifully among people who love to type things like, "Tough love is the only kind that works." The truth was something else entirely. Olivia worked remotely as a freelance bid coordinator and operations consultant. She helped regional suppliers, small contractors, and maintenance firms organize their vendor packets, clean up proposal submissions, track deadlines, and keep their documentation from falling apart before they could win contracts. It paid well because most people despised that kind of work, and most small businesses were genuinely terrible at it. She was good at systems. She was good at seeing disasters before they arrived. That skill made her enormously valuable to strangers. Inside her own family, it made her invisible. Have you ever been the most capable person in the room and the last one anyone thought to think? That was Olivia's life for 3 years, and vinyl wraps for small businesses across the Phoenix area. Then supply costs climbed. 2 major clients paid late, and 1 project stalled over permit issues. Suddenly, the company that had always looked solid from the outside was surviving week to week on fumes and the confidence of a man who refused to admit he needed help. Her father did what he always did when things turned ugly. He got louder. He blamed younger workers, difficult clients, the economy, regulations. He blamed everyone except himself. And eventually, quietly, he began relying on Olivia in ways he would never acknowledge out loud. The first month, she reorganized some invoices. The second month, she caught a missed permit renewal that would have cost him a municipal account worth thousands. Then she noticed he was not remitting sales tax correctly. Then she found equipment leases set to auto-renew at rates that should have been renegotiated years earlier. Then she discovered that half his receivables were fiction because nobody was following up properly, and a bookkeeper had quit without leaving anything clean behind. Every time she fixed one problem, 2 more appeared behind it, like rot discovered under drywall. She covered software subscriptions. She paid overdue utility balances tied to the company workshop. She handled insurance reinstatement fees, rush shipping on materials her father had forgotten to order, and 3 separate vendor deposits that would have killed active jobs if they had bounced. She negotiated payment plans with suppliers so they would not put his account on hold. She rewrote client emails so that the people receiving them believed they were dealing with a competent professional. When she covered a payroll gap one Friday because her father would rather have collapsed than admit he could not pay his installers, he later laughed about it and said families do not keep score. Families do not keep score. Remember that sentence, because families like his only ever say it when they are the ones benefiting from nobody counting. She was not living off him. She was quietly, invisibly holding his world together. And he introduced her to clients as, "My daughter is figuring some things out right now." The moment everything changed was not dramatic. It was a Friday night. She overheard him in the backyard telling her uncle and a neighbor that he was considering giving her 90 days to leave, because maybe hitting bottom would finally make a woman out of her. They laughed. Her sister laughed too. That was the first time Olivia stopped feeling hurt and started feeling clear. She did not confront him. She opened a spreadsheet. People assume that a woman's revenge begins with anger. Hers began with documentation. Not because she was cold, but because she understood something important about families built on contempt. The second you cry, you are unstable. The second you raise your voice, you are disrespectful. The second you defend yourself with emotion, you have already lost. Evidence was the only language her father could not interrupt, and even then, he would try. So she built a record going back 30 months. Every emergency payment, every software renewal, every permit fee she had paid so the city portal would not shut them out, every fuel card transfer, every invoice she had corrected before a client could reject it, every bid package she had assembled under her own login because her father had missed the submission deadline and then asked her to rescue it, every text, every voicemail from her uncle asking for a couple hundred to keep a van from being repossessed before Monday, every time her sister had borrowed money and not returned it. When she finally added everything up, the number made her sit back and stare at the screen. Company support alone had crossed $112,000 over 3 years, and that was before accounting for the unpaid administrative labor that had no obvious receipt. How much is it worth to catch a tax notice before the state freezes your account?
How much is it worth to know that every calm dinner your family enjoyed was made possible by someone else staying awake until 2 in the morning, fixing what you broke? Around the same time, a long-term client in Colorado offered her a contract with enough stability to move, rent her own place, and stop building her life around people who only valued her when she was useful and silent. She signed it. She put down a deposit on an apartment outside Denver. She told no one. She began moving her belongings out in small batches over several weeks, so gradually that nobody noticed. Winter clothes 1 week, books the next. The expensive monitor her father had always assumed had simply appeared by some kind of domestic magic. Then her father beat her to the formal eviction speech by 6 days. He cornered her in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning and said he wanted her out by the end of the month. He said he was doing it because he loved her enough to stop enabling her. He said no man would respect a woman who still leaned on her father at 30. He said she needed a real job, her own place, and a wake-up call. She asked him one question.
"Do you want me gone, or do you want an audience when I leave?" He smirked and said, "Maybe both." That was the moment she understood exactly how this needed to end. The Friday before she left, Olivia removed her card from every vendor portal. She canceled every auto-pay backup she had quietly tied to company utilities and service accounts. She notified one supplier that future emergency orders would require management approval, and she forwarded 2 overdue invoices to clients, exactly as her father had dictated them, word for word, without any of the softening or translation she had always quietly added. You would be amazed how quickly professional respect dissolves when people finally have to hear someone as they actually sound. She drove back Saturday to collect the last box and found the party. She took the photograph, and she left without saying a single word. The first 3 days after she left, nobody called. They thought they had won. That is how entitlement works. It mistakes your absence for surrender, right up until the machinery starts shaking. On Monday, a municipal client rejected a permit resubmission because the insurance certificate on file had expired.
Normally, Olivia would have caught the notice, called the broker, forced a same-day update, and resent the package before anyone panicked. This time, the email sat in the inbox until the client copied her father directly with the words, "Final delay before reassignment." On Tuesday, the project management software went dark because the backup card was gone and the primary card declined. Work orders, measurements, install dates, material notes, all of it inaccessible until someone fixed billing. On Wednesday, the power company left a shutoff warning on the workshop account. By Saturday morning, her father had called 6 times before noon. By the 3rd voicemail, the swagger was gone. By the 5th, so was the anger. On the 6th, what remained was panic dressed in the voice of a man who had spent his life expecting rescue, and was only now beginning to understand that rescue had a name, and that name had driven away. They met at a diner off the highway on Monday. She brought the packet, 31 pages, cover sheet, timeline, amounts, screenshots, payment references, notes on every emergency intervention, and at the very end, the photograph of the banner.
When her father opened it and saw the total, his eyes dropped to the number and then snapped back to her face as if the figure itself had said something unforgivable. He tried every defense available to a man who has been caught. He said she was inflating everything. She showed him the line items. He said the payments had been temporary. She reminded him of the dates and the payroll conversations that had surrounded them. He said families help each other, and that did not give her the right to act like a debt collector. She answered him calmly. When I lived in your house, you called it freeloading. When you lived off my money, it became family. He lowered his voice and told her not to do this in public. She reminded him that he had chosen the audience when she left. He had no answer for that. Eventually, he found what he believed was his final argument. He said she had still been living in his house at 30. That shelter erased every obligation he had accumulated. So she said, if I had paid market rent to a stranger and kept my money away from your business, you would have lost that workshop a year and a half ago.
If I had billed you like a client for everything I fixed, you would be bankrupt. The only reason you got to call me a freeloader is because I loved you quietly. That landed harder than any number on any spreadsheet. When he had exhausted every argument, he asked the only question that had ever truly mattered to him. How much of this can you turn back on? Not, are you all right? Not, we were wrong. Just operations. She told him honestly which accounts could be restored with deposits, which insurance would cost more now, which clients were already damaged because nobody had been there to make his communication sound professional. Then she stood up, set a second envelope on the table containing a list of bookkeepers, a tax resolution service, a utility assistance program, and a small business attorney, and she told him that was everything she was offering. He told her that if she walked out now, she should not expect to come back when things turned around. She picked up her keys. Dad, she said, the only reason things ever turned around in that family was because I was standing behind you, pushing. The house sold below asking price late that summer.
The company lost 2 major accounts. A truck was sidelined when insurance lapsed. Her uncle ended up sleeping on a friend's couch. Olivia, meanwhile, watched 1 contract in Colorado become 2, then referrals, then a properly structured business with deposits paid up front and boundaries that actually held. She rented a larger apartment. She bought a used car with cash. She learned what dinner felt like when nobody in the next room was manufacturing a crisis that required her to quietly absorb it. Her sister eventually drove to Colorado and, stripped of all the armor she usually wore, admitted the truth. She said she had always known Olivia was helping. She had just not known how much. And if she had admitted their father was lying, everything in that house became frightening, cowardly, human. Not enough to undo what had been done, but more honesty than Olivia had heard from anyone in years. Some months after the house sold, her father called from an unknown number. He said immediately that he was not calling about money, which told her that he knew precisely what she would think. Then he said he had found one of her mother's recipe cards while packing and thought she might want it. That was the first thing he had ever offered her that did not come wrapped around a demand. Mail it, she said. And he did. The card arrived 4 days later. Chicken pot pie, in her mother's handwriting, with a small note at the bottom that read, "Add more time if Richard complains." Olivia laughed so suddenly and so completely that she had to sit down. She framed it. People still ask whether a woman in her position should have helped one last time, whether walking away was too severe, whether the moral high ground required one more act of quiet sacrifice. That question sounds compassionate, but it hides the same trap that had held her for 3 years. It assumes the most virtuous person in any story is the one who agrees to be used again. Here is what justice after 50 or 30 or any age actually looks like. It is not a dramatic confrontation. It is not a public humiliation arranged for maximum effect. It is simply the moment you stop being the hidden infrastructure of someone else's life and start building your own.
If someone calls you family only when they need your labor, your money, or your silence, they are not protecting a relationship. They are protecting a system that works for them at your expense. Financial independence is not a backup plan. It is the foundation. It is what gives you the ability to document rather than beg, to leave rather than absorb, to say no rather than comply out of fear. Olivia's greatest tool was not the spreadsheet, though that mattered enormously. It was the contract she had signed in Colorado before anyone in that driveway knew she was already gone. Her father's greatest mistake was not throwing the party. His greatest mistake was believing that the person he had publicly humiliated would still be standing behind him, quietly keeping the lights on when the celebration was over. She was not the freeloader. She was the hidden payroll, the midnight repair, the buffer between chaos and consequence. And the day she drove away from that banner, that smoke, that driveway full of people who had confused her generosity with weakness, was not the worst day of her story. It was the first day of the right one.